This is High Tea and On the Path series, providing weekly insights and inspirations from the people who move food and beverage culture. This week's High Tea guest is Bill Esparza, Los Angeles-based James Beard Award-winning writer and author of El Mexicano. Bill is a leading authority on Latin American cuisine as a freelance writer for publications like The New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and Eater. He's also appeared on several food television programs. Let's hear what Bill's most excited about and looking forward to this week.
I would say, there is a ongoing theme of inspiration for me, and it's travel. And, the more I travel, the more I want to travel. So it's just like, I would say I've always been this way. I started out as a musician and I was on the road right out of college. And then when I made the transition from music to food, again, the travel changed, the nature of the travel changed, but the idea is always there. I had read this thing when I was actually on the road. It was an anonymous quote from the 16th century I believe 16th century. It said, "It's not necessary to live, but it's necessary to travel." And I'm like, that's exactly like, if we're going to be here, we're going to go out. I want to go out and explore. And so, I've had a chance in recent years to stop in some places that I didn't know very well. And so I'm really inspired about going to those places because, like in South America, I just went to Lima for the first time. I went to Montevideo for the first time. Brazil is a country where I'm trying to pick up different states each time I go, or a different city. Mm-hmm. And I've been to every single state in Mexico and all throughout those states. So I'm inspired by the destinations, and I don't really care if there's some great gastronomic destination for writing, as long as they have people and people are interacting with some kind of food culture. I'm really excited about that. Right now, I really want to go back to La Costa Chica de Oaxaca. Mm-hmm. I did a story on the Afro-Mexican cuisine of the region. And it's so fascinating to me because every time we talk about Oaxaca, we don't even talk about that food. Like, we talk about literally one region, the Valles Centrales. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, the Valles Centrales. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's much less interesting to me than what I saw in La Costa.
Well, there's so much more depth. There's obviously so much more depth of culture.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny that Afro-Mexicans are actually cooking more original than the indigenous people of the Valles Centrales, which are, but they're using more ingredients from the contact, what people want to call the Colombian exchange. And I like to call it the indigenous exchange because the most important products in the world really came out of that. Tomatoes, peppers, chocolate. Really impactful products. So the way they're cooking, they're doing like moles with crab and with shrimp and mussels, and products that you would find that are native to the region. So and they're also not using as many spices from the spice trade. It's more just chiles, simple spices, local products. And I really love that. And I love just the people there, the way they are really looking out for one another in their communities. It's pretty amazing.
What's the history behind this community?
Mexico, we've learned recently that they counted Black Mexicans for the first time on their census. And there's over 2 million Afro-Mexicanos living in Mexico in different parts. And a lot of them are in La Costa Chica, which is in between Puerto Escondido in Oaxaca and Acapulco in Guerrero. So below Acapulco and above Puerto Escondido, you find those communities. And there's also other parts of Mexico. There's a part I haven't visited yet, but it's in Coahuila. History documents that Seminoles that were running from the advances of the U.S. forces left Florida and came into Mexico and settled in this area that's in Coahuila. And so there's an Afro-Mexican community there, in Veracruz, other parts of Mexico. And really, it was kind of funny. The first time I really became aware, as a musician, there's this great bass player named Abraham Laboriel. If you look him up, if anybody looks him up, he's one of the most recorded instrumentalists, but definitely bass players of all time on pop records, jazz records. Super amazing musician. And when I ended up playing with him on this TV show thing, and I was talking to him, and he said he's from Mexico City, and I just looked at him like, "Oh wow, you're black. You're from Mexico City." And then I did some reading on it after, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's like Afro-Mexicanos." It's not, and so I mean, everybody wants to tell the story all the time of, well, there was slavery, and enslaved people were transported to Mexico, and those are all Afro-Mexicanos. But it's a lot more complex than that. Not everybody that came to Mexico was enslaved. The Seminoles certainly were fighters. They were fierce. That Africans who had mixed with local Seminole tribes and lived their way and adopted their lifestyle and became part of that group. And there were other people that were workers. There were people that were, vaqueros. We know now that many of the cowboys were black and many of the cowboys were Mexican. And so these people, different people, ended up in the coast. And now this place is, even today in 2024, there's not a house there that has air conditioning, and it's hot as hell. There are no services. There's no government. People get to vote there, but they have no, the government doesn't care about them. There's no education system there. There aren't hospitals. There aren't any hotels to stay when you want to go visit these communities. And if they go outside that community, they're subject to incredible amounts of racism. If they go to Mexico City, it's like they're taking the risk of being deported from the country they were born in to a place they've never been, being harassed by police, being harassed by people, the micro and macro aggressions, all day long. And so when they settle in that community, there's no one looking for them over there. It's not a place where you want to settle and take over that administration there. They don't have a big agricultural, economy there. They grow some things, definitely like fruit and corn and the basics that they need. But the economy there is very, it's like neighbors. That one neighbor's growing this and another neighbor has a chicken and people are bartering. But the cuisine is so amazing because it's all, a lot of it is original animals. Of course, they have cows and they have chickens and things, but these aren't like you go to the Gelson's and grab some Foster Farms. These are chickens that you have in your yard. And basically someone is I'm going to sell some chickens today. So they butcher a few chickens and they get on their bicycle and they go around town and they sell piece by piece, a leg to this person, a whole chicken to that person. Maybe there's we were at a street vendor that was doing sopes, beautiful sopes, and some other dishes. And they bought chicken from the chicken lady that just came by on her bicycle and everything that they needed to make barbacoa de pollo. And so for them, barbacoa, there aren't barbacoa vendors. There aren't stands and stalls. There is barbacoa for your family that night. There's barbacoa for a party. We had happened upon actually a celebration in Collantes. We got invited spontaneously to this big birthday party, and they were butchering a whole steer, and they made barbacoa with that. And it was served in this plaza. And I got a new appreciation for Coronas because, in America, Corona is not real Mexican beer. And of course, all these big brands now have been purchased by American and European corporations. But like every single Afro-Mexicano is drinking Corona because they don't drink mezcal in that region. It's too hot. And you literally, if you get mezcal and you take a sip, it evaporates before it gets to your lips, And so they're drinking Coronas and Victoria. So everybody's either drinking Victoria or Corona.
Victoria. And I like Victoria. I think it's a great beer.
And I like Corona. I drank it in college too much. But over there, it made a lot of sense. It was really refreshing, super, ice cold, getting coronas and being at this stand with, actually, we bought beers for these women that were making us our breakfast. And we were, we had breakfast there and we came back when they had their barbacoa and we brought beers and hung out with them. And then we ended up at the barbacoa later, and it was done in a big, giant galvanized steel tub. And they had, it was beef barbacoa, and it was coditos, the cold macaroni salad, and beans, tortillas, salsa verde, and buckets of coronas. But the people there,
wow, it's amazing.
The cooking is amazing. It's all foraged. They have these mussels that are from the mangroves they call tichindas, and they make tamales with the mussels. They put the mussel shell on inside the tamal, and they also use it for mole. I mean, who doesn't want a mole of mussels? That sounds to me a lot better than chicken.
It sounds absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And one other dish that's really unique, I think, is we went to a deposito, and they were making lunch, and they shared their food with us. And, deposito is where you take your empties back and you exchange it for a discount on the beers, and then you keep bringing the bottles back. And so we had some beers at the deposito, and they brought out this bowl of mussels that was steamed with black bean paste, and it was mixed in. It was all, it all soaked up all the liquids of the mussels, and so amazing. Just love that cooking, and the people were just so wonderful to talk to and hang out with.
I think there's a number of regions, with similarities. I think of Bahia. I think of Bahia in the sense in Brazil, which I'm sure you've been to, where
I have.
Everybody talks about the strong, specifically certain parts of Bahia, the strong influence of African culture that's still there, but the profound influence that, there are certain dishes that come from these communities that are sort of known as Brazilian dishes, but they really have a tremendous influence of this mix of African and indigenous and some of the colonialists as well. And that's kind of what you're talking about also with this specific region. Bahia has become synonymous, certain dishes have become synonymous with Brazilian cooking. Do you see the opportunity for this specific region and these specific people and this culture where there's more of a definitive acknowledgement of some of what they're doing and how it could potentially permeate across not only Mexico, but across the world as well?
Well, I mean, the thing about what's interesting is, Brazil is also a very, racist country, and has, I want to say it might be the last country to end slavery, or one of them. They ended slavery in 1888, I think, after the United States, decades after the U.S. ended it. Mm-hmm. And so the thing about the Baianas and their dish acarajé, which is the most famous dish, is Baianas have moved around the country. And so you can find acarajé from a Baiana in the night market there in Rio de Janeiro, in Lapa, in São Paulo. You find them. You find them in Belo Horizonte. You find anywhere you go in Brazil, there's acarajé.
You find it everywhere.
And a Baiana. So the discrimination of Afro-Mexicanos in Mexico keeps them stuck in their communities. And so it's really hard for them to just even venture out. And, there's more acceptance and a little bit more in a tourist zone like Puerto Escondido, where you do have Afro-Mexicans living there, and even Acapulco. But their food, they don't have a dish that's being spread around the country by Afro-Mexicanos where they're going to get an opportunity, where acarajé is so revered. And Brazil does accept one thing, I think, that like acarajé should be from a Black woman from Bahia, a Baiana. So you don't see someone from, a gaúcha from Rio Grande do Sul, from the South, red-haired woman doing acarajé. You just don't see that. And I'm just wondering, I think there's a certain reverence for Baianas. And, do you watch Carnaval? So every parade in Rio and São Paulo, every samba school has baianas, and they have the baianas with the big dresses, and they have a place of prominence in Carnaval. So I think there is that, even though there is racism, it doesn't end racism, but it's a certain acceptance or a certain popularization of their dance, their food, their music. They're obviously Ashe is very popular. The music, obviously, capoeira, things like that.
Of course.
Where in Oaxaca, I don't know that the moles of Afro-Mexicanos or the tamales of Afro-Mexicanos is going to rise above the indigenous foods. So when people think of mole in Oaxaca, they think of the people of the indigenous, the Zapotecos, the Mixtecos, and those communities that really are going to be the ones to represent that food. Same thing with tamales, and in the Valles Centrales, their tlayudas are super famous. And so we're looking at indigenous people, and those people can go around anywhere and sell Oaxacan food.
Yeah, and they're doing it, which kind of brings us to, we're both sitting in LA right now, and you and I were chatting a few days ago, and I know you cover very frequently in Eater and New York Times and in other articles, sort of the proliferation and the expansion of not just Mexican, but as we were talking the other day, Oaxacan specifically cuisine. And so I would love for, in your perspective, being so close and examining and discovering, how is that influencing LA food culture? How has sort of Oaxacans and sort of different regions within Mexico really influenced? What are you seeing? How are you seeing the evolution of Mexican cuisine in Los Angeles?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have these strong influences. Obviously, Oaxaca with mezcal. I mean, you've seen the popularity of mezcal in the last decade.
Absolutely.
I remember, actually, I didn't even know I was in a Oaxacan restaurant. There was this, oh my God, I'm not going to remember it right now, but there was this popular restaurant in, I want to say it was around 92 or the early 90s I was there. And it was in West LA. And I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to remember the name. But these guys were from, I think the name of the restaurant was named after their city. And they were Oaxacan owners, but they couldn't get the ingredients. So they had mole and a few other things, but it was more like generic Mexican food or, national Mexican food with some Oaxacan touches. But that was the first place I ever saw mezcal. And of course, it was from a Texan, a guy from Texas who was making his own brand. That was Del Maguey. And so before that, I only knew Gusano Rojo from my grandfather, who would bring it back from Mexico when he'd go back there, which is that terrible, awful mezcal with the worm. And I have a story about that in college. That's the last time I drank it, and I don't need to ever taste it again. But when the few brands started coming in, it still haunts
your dreams at night.
Oh, I have a visual playback of that whole night. I can see myself opening the bottle, and I can see all the things that happened after. And but when artisanal mezcal started to slowly come in, and then it just went into super high gear. Honestly, with Madre. With Ivan Vasquez, the owner of Madre, he has really gone all the way in and made it all about artisanal mezcal, no commercial brands, no celebrity brands. And he's done it, which is kind of amazing, saying no to everybody who wants to give him money, give him product, and making a space for he's pushing other bars. I think Mirate has a great mezcal program, but they're also driven by what, the precedent set by Ivan. And so that culture where Oaxaca makes the majority of the mezcal of the 10 states in the denomination of origin, Oaxaca is the most prominent and the most famous and the largest supplier. So that we're drinking mezcal in every bar now, which we weren't, 10 15 years ago. Certainly mole and Oaxacan cuisine. I mean, this is the second largest Oaxacan city on earth. So we have more Oaxacans and Oaxacan businesses here than you even find in Mexico City and, Monterrey or Guadalajara. And a lot of Mexican cities don't even have any Oaxacan foods. So it's and they have only Valles Centrales things. We have, Mixtecos, and, you can find, we have Mijes here making al pastor. We have people from the Chinantla region. We have people from other states doing things here that you would not find in places like Ciudad de Mexico. So I think that also Sinaloans, people from Nayarit, have a huge influence on all of the food culture in LA. I mean, it's really funny if you're Mexican American or if you recently immigrated to Mexico, immigrated from Mexico to the United States. For you, like, oh, the Cheesecake Factory is a nice family dinner, right? And so we're going to all these really these places that are not great, that are very commercial, that have bad food. I don't know. People like Cheesecake Factory. I'm not going there, or Olive Garden, right? And people have nostalgia for it. I don't. But they still insist on having the best mariscos, though. So it's like one night, Friday night at Cheesecake Factory, but Sunday is going to be finding the best mariscos in town you can find. And those come from Sinaloa and Nayarit. And so we have a lot of places in town where on a weekend afternoon, in backyards, in fancy restaurants, you find mariscos, right? And so all of the Mexican American cantinas have all adopted ceviches and aguachiles and other plates, cocteles and nobody's copying cocteles from Tamaulipas or Yucatan because they don't. I'm sorry, but that coast, they don't make good mariscos. They have some cool things here and there, but they're not a place of mariscos. Veracruz, I know the white cookbook authors always talk about Veracruz and mariscos, but no, they don't have the best cocktail culture, the best, raw bar, the barra fria is in Nayarit and Sinaloa. So that has a huge impact. The music, the dress, the cowboy and cowgirl culture, mariscos, banda, all that stuff is huge. What's really interesting to me is when it all mixes together and tropicalizado of the culture. And so I go to these underground pajaretes places. Have you had pajaretes in LA?
No, I need to go with you next time. You need to invite me. Yeah.
Do you know pajaretes?
No, I don't. No.
So pajaretes they're a traditional breakfast of Jalisco where you have raw milk from leche bronca from a cow, and you get your cup, your mug, your jarro, and you put chocolate, like grated chocolate, sugar, Nescafe, and this really raunchy this Uruapan sugarcane spirit that's like 192 proof.
Whew.
And you can't even drink it straight, but you put it in there and you hold it under the cow and you get hot milk and it makes this breakfast. And now in Jalisco, it's really a breakfast. So they just put a little bit of the liquor in there to really kill the bacteria, any bacteria you might get. But over here in LA, it's like, this is party. So you're taking double shots in there of this really harsh alcohol. And then, you're hanging out. A banda from Sinaloa is playing, or some other norteña band is playing for a Jalisco tradition. And Oaxacans are showing up that are workers in the area. So you're getting all these different cultures that are kind of building something kind of different here. And you get like this all-day party at some of these pajaretes, and in Jalisco, you go to pajaretes at 5 a.m. and the place is done by 7:30 and they close up for the day. Here, they're going into the evening and they switch from pajaretes to buckets of beer, and then they're eating birria. It's like this whole incredible mashup from all these different states of Mexico.
I love that. That's incredible. I want to. Next time you go, I want to go. I want to experience that.
You got to get down there.
It sounds incredible. Bill, you're an absolute wealth of knowledge. How do people best connect with you?
Well, Instagram. I'm the same on all social media, but Instagram is the one I'm on the most. It's Street Gourmet LA, and it's the same on TikTok. I'll eventually get there on that TikTok thing, and Twitter is a whole other thing. So really, Instagram is where I make most of my announcements of what's going on. I promote my articles. I have some discussions with people, and lately I've been doing these Q&As and having a lot of fun with that.
I love it. I'm excited for our community to dive in, explore more of you. I'm sure many people, if they're not familiar with you, they have read an article that you've done and how you're telling stories about Mexican culture, which I think is so incredible, especially being here in Los Angeles. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and excited to have you a part of our community.
Man, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on and having this discussion.
On the Pass is hosted and produced by me, Gabriel Ornelas, and edited and mixed by Dylan Agajanian, with original music by Dylan Agajanian.